Hello, everyone, and welcome to the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed. I'd like to welcome everyone to the show who may be checking it out for the first time. Welcome. If you are a continued, consistent listener, welcome and thank you. I hope those who are checking out the show for the first time become consistent listeners to the show. I welcome you all. Today, we're going to pivot a little bit. We talk movies here, we talk reviews, we talk sports, we talk wrestling. But today, we're going to talk about the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who passed away this past Tuesday on February the 17th, 2026, at the ripe young age of 84 years old. Jesse Jackson is known for being a civil rights activist, for being a politician. Of course, he is a Baptist minister as well. He's also known widely for being a prodigy of the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the civil rights movement. And he is one of the most prominent civil rights leaders in the last, I don't know, 20th, early 21st centuries. He was the last of that. Well, I'm not going to say the last, but prominent, figure from that era of civil rights and segregation and the fight that we are still fighting, by the way. But I will say, as a black man living, growing up, raised in the South, I appreciate all of those gentlemen and ladies and who pretty much died died for the cause, man. Who fought for the cause during that era and continue to fight, because their fight, the sacrifices they made, is the reason why I'm able to do what I do, or my children are able to do what they do, and it's because of their efforts. And I greatly appreciate it. I don't care if it's somebody you probably don't 100% agree with, or with everything that they say or stand for, or whatever the case may be. Uh, you still got to give their respect. For example, Louis Farrakhan. I'm not a big Louis Farrakhan fan, but I can acknowledge that Louis Farrakhan is fighting a good fight, and I respect everything that he does. As far as his fight. Now, I may not agree with everything that he says, but I do respect the fight. It's kind of like, and we're going to get back to Jesse Jackson, but it's kind of like uh, during that era of the civil rights movement, when you had Martin Luther King Jr. on one side and you had Malcolm X on the other side. Both had two different methods to achieve a goal, but they both had the same goal. One was peaceful and nonviolent. The other was the opposite. They were yin and yang, but they had the same goal. For those of you who are in the comic books, just look at X-Men. X-Men is pretty much the same thing. When you look at Professor Xavier and Magneto, both extremes to their own degree, but different sides of the coin. But they had the same goal, or still had the same goal, and that is equality. To be treated as normal, functioning human beings on this planet, more specifically in this country. And Jesse Jackson was right in the middle of all of that. After the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., he was the next up, next man up. And he took it and ran with it. Literally. I mean, he ran for president twice. He ran for president twice. One of the founders of the Rainbow Coalition. His efforts spanned beyond the United States, going as far as South Africa, with his stance against the racial apartheid there in South Africa. You know, so much. He did so much, and we're going to go over a good portion of it. We'll be here about a week and a half going over all that he did throughout his life, through those 84 years, and I just can't do it. We can't. I don't have the time, the voice, or the or storage space on this program to discuss every little thing that he did throughout his career and life. But we're going to go over some big points that took place throughout his life and his time as a civil rights activist, as a political figure in American politics, and so on and so forth. So let's dive into the life and times of Jesse Jackson. But well, before we get, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we get to this, let me give you my other little tidbit about Jesse Jackson. I never really followed Jesse Jackson growing up. Now, granted, all the civil rights movement happened before I was born, thank God. But my parents went through it all. But I, I did. But he wasn't taught about like Martin Luther King Jr. was, like Malcolm X was, like Medgar Evers was. We didn't get lessons about Jesse Jackson. But now, granted, when I was growing up, he was still in the cultural zeitgeist. He was still out, out and about, working, doing God's work, and so it wasn't like he had a made for TV movie about him during that time or anything like that. So, or books or anything of that sort that I was able to pick up on, and so I didn't really gravitate to Jesse Jackson. I acknowledged him. I knew who he was. I knew what he was about, but following his career in life, that I didn't really do that. But as I got older, especially more of an adult, which was about a week and a half ago, I really started. I really started to pay attention to everything that he did and spoke about, even some of the controversial stuff, which I'm not going to go over, which we're not going to talk about. And I'm not doing it because, I feel a certain way about it or I don't believe it and all this other stuff. It's conspiracy theory, and it's a time and a place for that. And I'm not diving in on that. And if I'm not diving into that because there's no proof. It's all speculatory, and I'm not getting into that. I don't know because I wasn't there. But I'm going to speak on the stuff that I do know for a fact that he did throughout his life. Jesse Jackson was born Jesse Louis Burns, believe it or not. Jackson wasn't his name. Burns, on October the 8th, 1941 in Greenville, South Carolina, to Helen Burns and Noah Lewis Robertson. And the big thing about that is his mom was 18 when she got married, which isn't, crazy. But the crazy part was the man she married was 33. So it was a little gap there. But that marriage didn't last too long because a year after Jesse was born, Helen remarried a man by the name of Charles Henry Jackson, who was a post office worker, and he adopted Jesse. Hence, he gave him his last name. But in spite of the fact that he took his stepfather's last name, he still had a close relationship with Robertson when he grew up, as he grew up. So he said that both men, he considered both of them fathers. He had two fathers. He was blessed. He had two dads to rear him as a child. But as a child, Jesse Jackson was pretty much picked on like every other child, really. But he was picked on for being born out of wedlock, and that's a thing. At least it was. It was a thing when I was young. I remember that. I remember going to school with kids who were pretty much bastards. That's what a child out of wedlock is, a bastard. But man, kids were cruel, man. Still are, but they will mess with you about anything. And I seen a few kids get picked on about that. But nowadays I don't think that's a thing because I think actually it's crazy how it flipped. And I'm gonna get back to Jesse. I'm gonna get, I'm gonna get back to Jesse, but it's crazy how it flips because my kids, my daughters, were picked on for not being born out of wedlock, for having two parents that were married. Ain't that crazy? They used to come home and tell me this, and I was blown away by that. I was like, wait, that's a thing? That's a thing? But it just goes to show you how stupid kids are. And I mean all kids, including when we were kids, for those of us of a certain age. Kids are just dumb. they, they they just dumb. I don't have any other words to describe it. But back to Jesse Jackson. He said that those experiences helped motivate him to succeed. You know, most people would, well, not most, but there's a contingent of people that take bullying or being bullied or being mistreated, take that trauma, bottle it up, and let that draw you down throughout your life. And I'm speaking to people personally. I'm talking about myself. I don't know why I'm dancing around. I'm talking about myself because I did that. I did that. Man, you want to talk about getting picked on. I got picked on so bad in school. The teacher picked on me in school. That's how bad it was for me. And so I took all that, bottled that up for well into in my 40s. It wasn't until recently when I started really focusing on my mental health, whereas I was able to let that go. I could not let that go. I mean, it hurt me that bad. And so I I'm envious, even though you're not supposed to be, but I am. I'm envious of people that can take that and flip it and allow that to motivate them. Because I wish I would have did that, and Jesse Jackson did that. And so during the Jim Crow segregation laws era, uh, he was taught to go to the back of the bus and use separate water fountains. You know, that was the thing, which we're pretty much heading back to now under Trump. But that was the status quo, and he accepted that. He rolled with that, literally on the bus. Like every other black American around that time, because that was the law, you know. But it wasn't until the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 that's when it all changed for him. He saw that you can stand up against something that is wrong, that you can fight against segregation, you know. So he attended this racially segregated school, Sterling High School in Greenville, where he was elected class president, and he finished 10th in the class, and he earned letters in basketball and football and I think baseball too. He was a super athlete in high school. And so after he graduated in 1959, Jesse Jackson, he rejected a contract from the minor leagues in baseball, so he could attend the University of Illinois on a football scholarship. And so after his second semester at the predominantly white college there at the University of Illinois, he transferred to North Carolina A&T, which is a historically black college at HBCU. And the reason he changed schools or transferred to North Carolina A&T is because of course, racial issues. It was because they prevented him from playing quarterback at the university, and they limited his participation in I think a public speaking class that he was taking there. So he left. He went to a HBCU. Um, at North Carolina A&T, he played quarterback. He was elected student body president. He became active in local civil rights protests against segregation, uh, including segregated libraries and restaurants of that sort. He graduated with a bachelor's in science degree in 1964. After graduating, he attended a seminary in Chicago on a scholarship. So he had left the seminary in 1966, 3 classes short from earning his master's degree to focus full time on the civil rights movement. He was ordained as a minister in 1968. He would later earn a degree in the year 2000 from that seminary based on his previously earned credit along with his substantial work and life experiences. I guess better late than never. It took him it took him what 40 years? Well, what 32 years to be exact to get that degree. But hey, at least they gave it. At least he got it. It well earned, I must say, on his behalf. Now, swinging back to his activism in the civil rights movement, he was known for this commanding public attention since he first started working with Martin Luther King Jr. And so in 1965, he participated in the Selma to Montgomery marches, which was organized by James Bevel, Martin Luther King, and other civil rights leaders in Alabama. And impressed by Jackson's drive and organizational abilities, Martin Luther King Jr. soon began giving Jesse Jackson a role in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So in 1966, Dr. King and Bevel selected Jesse Jackson to head the Chicago branch of the SCLC economy arm, which was Operation Breadbasket. And he was promoted to the national director the following year in 1967. Now, Operation Breadbasket had been started by a later leadership of the not the AC, but the SCLC as a job placement agent for black. So, under Jesse Jackson's leadership, the key goal was to encourage massive boycotts by black consumers as a means to pressure white-owned businesses to hire blacks and to pressure goods and services from black-owned firms. Fast forwarding to 1971, Operation Push, which is People United to Save Humanity, officially began operations on December 25th, Christmas Day of 1971. From the beginning, Jesse Jackson planned to use Project Push towards politics and to pressure politicians to work to improve economic opportunities for blacks and poor people of all races. And so the SCLC officials reportedly felt the new organization would help black businesses more than it would help the poor. In 1978, Jesse Jackson called for a closer relationship between blacks and the Republican Party, telling the party's national committee that black people need the Republican Party to compete for us so we can have real alternatives, which I agree. I do agree with that, even though I can't stand the Republican Party, at least what it is now. I don't care for it. They don't care for Democrats either, but that's that's a whole nother show. But the options, bro, is almost like we have no options. Most black people vote Democrat. That's just inherent that you vote Democrat because Republicans don't show that they are willing to help the black community. And now I know there are those people who are out there who feel like, oh, it shouldn't have to focus on black people. Why not? You focus on white. they blatantly focus on white. I mean, all black folks want is a chance, just a little crumbs off the table. We can't even get that, but we don't have an alternative. One side says they are going to help us, even though they don't. but at least they say they're gonna help us. The other side just flat out said they're not. Now I do respect them because at least they ain't lying. but that's the truth. We don't have any alternatives, and it's sad. It's sad that it's like we never had a choice, and that's why I changed. I changed. I went straight independent, registered independent. I'll choose for myself. I'm not going to be pigeonholed by a party. And nobody should be. It should not come down to whether it's blue or red, a donkey or elephant. It shouldn't come down to that just because they have a R or a D by their name. I'm gonna vote for them. That shouldn't be the reason why you vote for somebody. You should vote for the best candidate. I don't care what party they're in. But I do agree with Jesse Jackson in that sense. Now let's jump to 1983. And this is when Kevin Reed was around. I was around all these good stuff. So I remember all this to a degree. But in 1983, Jesse Jackson announced that he was running for president in the 1984 election. And he was only the second black person to ever do this. And the first one was Shirley Chisholm, I believe her name. They made a movie with her. I think Regina Hall played her on a Netflix movie last year, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, yeah, he mounted a campaign in 1984. Of course, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows. His candidacy kind of divided support amongst black politicians. One prominent name who didn't support him or endorse him in 1984 was the widow of Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King. She did not endorse Jesse Jackson, and it is not for any nefarious reasons. I think her reasoning was she didn't believe that he would win the nomination, so she didn't throw her support behind. Needless to say, he didn't win the nomination. He did participate in a few debates, but overall, he didn't win. I don't think he won any caucuses. Definitely didn't win Iowa. He didn't. He did not. He didn't win. No votes. To be honest with you, but who went to? That's the trivia question. Who did get the nomination? It was against Reagan. Was it Gary Hart? I can't remember now. Now I'm blanking. But anyways, at the 1984 Democratic National Convention, he had a speech. He delivered his Rainbow Coalition speech. And what makes that speech so prominent and etched in the annals of history in this country is because that was the first speech of any national conference to mention gays and lesbians. This was 1984, and it wasn't homophobic. It was a speech to talk about how America is a quilt or a blanket. No, America is I can't. I'm gonna butcher it, so let me shut up. But anyways, the threads in paraphrasing it now, the threads are made up of whites, Hispanic, black, Jews, women, Native Americans, and farmers, and lesbians, the gays. It's all made up of this fabric, and that's what America is. It's an American quilt, just to give you the layman's version of it all, and it's the truth, But that was the first time that America was described that way. It wasn't just for one singular group. It was for everybody, and that's all awesome. Of course, I didn't listen to it in 19. I was 5 years old, but I did listen to it later in life, and I thought it was powerful. It was a powerful message that he spoke that day. Now, at the same time as the inauguration of what's his name, Ronald Reagan. I think it was his second term, his second inauguration, Jesse Jackson, he led a protest. He led several hundred supporters to the, I think, to the Washington Memorial around that time, and he was stressing that they need to keep alive the hopes of those who have fallen through the safety net and challenged America to protect the poor. And so that was what that protest was about. So we fast forward to 1986, and there was speculation that Jesse Jackson would try it again, that he would run for president again in 1988. So in October of 1987, Jesse Jackson announced his candidacy in the 1988 presidential election. At the time of his announcement, polling showed that he had led in 9 of the 12 southern states that would hold primaries or caucuses in March of the following year. And he led the Democratic field at 27%. And so in November, Jesse Jackson announced that uh, the Speaker of the California State Assembly, Willie Brown, would serve as his campaign chairman, while political strategist Gerald Alston became his campaign manager. Later that month, Jesse Jackson announced that he would stop his tour of the Persian Gulf to attend the funeral of his friend Harold Washington, who was the mayor of Chicago, before changing his mind. Um, Jesse Jackson's campaign platform included a call for a single-payer system of universal health care, higher taxes on the wealthy, and defense spending cuts intended to reduce federal budget deficits and increase education, housing, welfare, and child care spending. Also ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment, an executive order to ban discrimination against gays and lesbians in federal agencies, the Army, and to recognize gay couples as for spousal benefits, reducing the supply and flow of drugs into communities, the creation of a domestic version of the World Bank called the American Investment Bank that would have the authority to sell government bonds to rebuild America's infrastructure, suspending the development of new nuclear weapons in order to eventually ban them altogether, and a very different relationship with the Soviet Union involving a constructive partnership. In the Iowa caucus that took place that following year, Jesse Jackson came in fourth in the in the voting. He would later go on to lose the New Hampshire caucus to Mike Dukakis, Dukakis, whatever his name is, by a wide margin. And also on Super Tuesday contest, he did win in Virginia, Georgia, Louisiana, represent Mississippi, and Alabama. One of the big surprises, Jesse Jackson had a surprising victory by winning the Michigan primary by a landslide. He blew out the rest of the competition there in Michigan. This made him the front runner in the race. But a horse that runs hard doesn't run long. He started to sputter out a little bit, losing the New York primary. He lost the Wisconsin primaries. It was like back to back to back to back. And then by the end of the Democratic primaries, Jackson had received, I think it was 6.9 million votes, and he won 11 contests, 7 primaries. Alabama, the District of Columbia, Georgia, Louisiana, stand up, Mississippi, Puerto Rico, Virginia. Wait. Let me back. Puerto Rico? Wait, Puerto Rico is a part of the United. Anyways, yeah, he won those territories and 4 caucuses. He won Delaware, Michigan, South Carolina, and Vermont. And so the day after the last primaries, Jesse Jackson met with Mike Dukakis, and they discussed some of Jesse Jackson's platforms, such as the universal same day uh, on site voter registration and changing the rules for the winner take all delegation. And so Jackson felt he deserved uh, Dukakis' consideration as a running mate. You know, in case if you win, won't you consider me as your vice president? You know, and he agreed, but added that Jackson was with no special or greater consideration simply because he finished second in the primaries. And so polling in April found Dukakis Jackson ticket would defeat George Bush in that presidential race, but that either alone would lose to Bush. So you needed both in order to defeat he was vice president at the time, Vice President Bush. Um, but Dukakis, he picked Lloyd I think Benson. I don't know. I don't know who that is. I think he was a senator or something. And Jackson responded, that he had the right to make his own little strategic choice. Well, we all know what happened. We all know what happened. It was a landslide. George Bush defeated. I'm talking Daddy Bush. He defeated. I mean, wiped the slate with Mike Dukakis. It wasn't even a race. But if everybody's points that if he would have chose Jesse Jackson as his vice presidential candidate, he would have won. And look what happened. So we fast forward. Let's fast forward to 2007. I know we're skipping over a lot. What, about 20 years here, and he did a lot in those 20 years. But we're we're going to get to a part that I found funny and heartwarming at the same time. It is crazy. As Jesse Jackson, he declared his support for Senator Barack Obama in the 2007 or 2008 Democratic presidential primaries. So he later criticized Obama for acting like he's white in response to the Jenna 6 beating case. And in case you don't know what the Jenna 6 is, in Jenna, that's here in Louisiana, Jenna, Louisiana. That was the case where I think in 2005, 2006, somewhere up in there, when 6 black teenagers, they were convicted for beating up this white kid at the high school, which they all attended. And so the white kid, he was injured by these 6 teenagers and received treatment at the hospital. While the case was pending, it was often cited by the media by its racial injustice in the United States. It was a thing. It was a whole thing. I'm not gonna get into it. That's a whole nother show. But because thinking about it, yeah, my head is starting to hurt. I remember all that took place around that time. But anywho's, they was on two opposite sides of the coin on that issue there. And so there was an interview. It was an interview that Jesse Jackson had did. I think it was on Fox News, ironically enough, but he didn't know his mic was on at the time. And he was whispering to somebody that was on the panel with him, and they were talking about Barack. And he said that he wants to cut his nuts off. And he didn't know he had a live mic. And so he did not like Barack Obama, at least at that moment. And so Jesse was expressing his disappointment at that time because Barack Obama had delivered this speech, this Father's Day speech, and he was chastising black fathers. And I remember that speech because I was a black father at that time. Well, it still is, but I just became a black father around that time. And he was chastising them, and he wasn't lying. But that rubbed Jesse Jackson the wrong way. And so, in another interview he did with Fox News, Jesse Jackson, he apologized and he reiterated that he does support Barack Obama for president. So, in a, I remember this moment like it was yesterday, bro. Jesse Jackson, he was at Barack Obama's victory rally in Chicago, and I remember that moment when they announced it, when they called it on whichever news I was watching, probably CNN or one of them. I forgot which one I was watching. And in Chicago at the park, you see everybody running in the park to the stage. It was just the most. I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it. And Jesse Jackson was there, of course, and they showed a clip of Jesse Jackson, and he was just in tears. He was crying. Like, think about it. Just think about what he did throughout his life and where it all started. Being on back of the bus, drinking in white only. Well, not he couldn't drink white only, but drinking in the colored water fountains and being picked on and all kind of racial injustice that took place and what he was fighting for and the what was sacrificed, friends and family dying around him and all this here, to the point where you see a black man elected president and he's dared to experience it. And you saw the tears running down his face. And at that moment, I didn't feel any emotion at that moment, but that did prompt me to call my parents. And I called them. And I remember my mom answered the phone. And she wasn't watching it because she didn't want to get stressed out. She didn't want, and because just to back up a little bit, when I talked about what Jesse Jackson went through and all this here, my parents went through all this. And because Jesse Jackson the same age as my dad would have been. Well, actually, he's a year younger. My dad's a year older than he would have been. But anyways, he went through all that, and they grew up in Mississippi. So it was you can rub a little hot sauce on what my parents went on in comparisons to the rest of the Jim Crow era. But anywho's, I thought about them and what they went through, and the stories they told me growing up, and they literally lived on a plantation, So it's not that far fetched. And so when I called my mom and she answered the phone, and the first thing I said, "Mama, we did it." And all she did, she screamed. She like, "He won?" And I said, "He won." And my mom, she just broke down. And all I could do was hold the phone and cry. It was like, people just don't get it, bro. This goes deeper. This goes deeper than what you can imagine to black folks, to black people, especially black people who lived through that crap, bro. And that's how monumental that moment was. Now, I don't care about the politics behind Barack Obama, whether you agree with him or not. That's debatable, whatever. You can feel how you feel. But that moment when he won, it was like the first time breathing fresh air, and I just felt it at that moment, and it was glorious. And so what spawned that off, what inspired me to call my mother, was when they showed Jesse Jackson crying. Now, there's two ways you can look at it. He was emotional, thinking back and recounting what he went through his life, or or he could be thinking about, man, that should have been me. That could have been me. Or I can't stand this this ninja. And so it's up to you to interpret. Right now, we don't know. We'll never know, unfortunately, what he was truly feeling at that moment. But I would like to think that he was reflecting on his life and getting to this moment. It was beautiful, man. It was beautiful. I will always appreciate that moment because if I wouldn't, I wasn't going to call my parents. I really was because my mom had already told me she didn't want to know. She didn't want to know. She'll read about it tomorrow when she wake. What she didn't want to know. And so if it wasn't for me looking at Jesse Jackson and calling my mom and her having that moment, which allowed me to have that moment, I hey bro, thank you Jesse for that. Just for that, because it will last a lifetime. It's going to last. That was 20 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was one of the most beautiful moments I've ever had with my parents, and I'll never forget it. Jesse Jackson was married to Jacqueline Brown on December 31st, 1962, and together they had 5 children. But on February 17th, 2026, Jesse Jackson died in his home in Chicago. The family announced the death on social media, and he received tributes from all stretches of the world. you know, Al Sharpton, of course, Bill Clinton, along with Hillary. Barack Obama had a lovely tribute to him. Joe Biden, um, uh, current politicians such as Chuck Schumer, Martin Luther King III, Kamala Harris, Andrew Young. The list goes on and on. Even your president, Donald Trump, he actually had kind where he didn't. Of course, it was written, and everything in my heart tells me he did not write this, but because it was too legible. It made too much sense, and it was too heartfelt to come out of his mouth. But it was a beautiful tribute as well. It to a man it well deserved. Just to wrap it up, speaking of well deserved, let's go over some of the awards and honors that the Reverend Jesse Jackson received over his lifetime. Ebony Magazine named Jesse Jackson to its 100 most influential Black American list. That was back in 1971. In 1979, Jesse Jackson received the Jefferson Award for greatest public service benefiting the disadvantaged. In 1988, the NAACP awarded Jesse Jackson its President's Award. In the year 2000, Bill Clinton awarded Jesse Jackson the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest honor bestowed upon civilians. In 2015, Jesse Jackson was awarded the honorary degree of Doctor Honors Causa from the University of Edinburgh in recognition of decades of campaigning for civil rights. And just as recent as 2021, Jesse Jackson was appointed commander of the Legion of Honor, France's highest order of merit, presented by French President Emmanuel Macron for his work in civil rights. Also in 2022, Jesse Jackson received an honorary doctorate from Benedict College. Rest in peace to the Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights icon, politician, Baptist minister. The list goes on and on, but an icon, an American icon, and he will be missed, man. He will be missed, and I hope and pray. This is what I always uh worry about when people, especially my community, the Black community, when crying for help. We where is that person? Who's that person that's gonna stand up and fight for us? We don't have Martin no more. We don't have Malcolm no more. We don't have Jesse no more. And so who's that person? Well, you. You're that person. You're that person. You need to stand up and fight. Yeah, fight. One man can't do it alone. We all got to do it together. And these guys, all of these soldiers who fought for the cause, who walked so we could run, Uh, they're all gone now, and Jesse Jackson is one of the last uh, uh ones from that era who really fought for the cause. And uh my hat goes out to him. Rest in power. Uh Awesome life he lived. Awesome bridges that he built for the community, and not just the black community. Not just the black. He fought for everybody. He fought for those, for all of the disadvantaged. Let's just wrap it up like that. For the disadvantaged, for the overlooked, for the poor, for the hungry. That's who he fought for, and he will be missed. And so my condolences to the Jackson family. Uh, Very symbolic that he passed away on the 100-year anniversary of Black History Month, right? Dead smack in the middle of Black History Month, uh, the 100th edition. So it is poignant, and that is somewhat poetic, I must say. And so I would love to know, what did you think of Jesse Jackson? Did you follow his life and career and his speeches and his point? I'm telling you, I Am Somebody. I still listen to that. That is one of the best affirmational speeches you ever going to hear. It actually is a poem. It is beautiful. Beautiful. I am somebody, you know. I would love to know, what are your thoughts about Jesse Jackson throughout his life? Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we looked back at a small portion of the life of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Rest in peace. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.